Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining us for our voter activation virtual town hall. I'm Kerwin Lowe, polemark of the Hartford Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated. The presidential election is less than 2 weeks away, but there are still many people in our communities who have not made the decision to vote and oftentimes don't fully appreciate the grave implications of not voting. Tonight, we will be hearing from a group of leaders who represent state and local legislators, community activists, and advocates for communities in need. Before we get going, I want to stress that Kappa Alpha Psi does not endorse any one party or candidate. This town hall is a non-political, nonpartisan event. So to get us started, Sam Gray, Vice Polemark of the Hartford Alumni Chapter and CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Hartford, will be introducing our moderator for the evening.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, Leslie Mays. Leslie is a local television journalist with more than a decade of experience covering breaking news and has traveled across the country on the campaign trail where she followed the Hillary Clinton and Obama campaigns during the 2008 election cycle. Leslie is a Washington, D.C. native and credits her hometown for her passion for politics. Ladies and gentlemen, Leslie Mays.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be with all of you today, and I am so excited to be talking about something that I hold near and dear to my heart, and that is politics and political involvement and just using our voice as our vote. I'm really excited for what we're going to talk about, so I just want to jump right into it first. I'm going to introduce all of the folks that we have as panelists tonight, a number of different folks representing all sorts of different sectors here in Connecticut in the political space, who I'm sure are going to give us all some insightful, wonderful things to think about as we approach this election, which is now less than 2 weeks away, and also a reminder to everyone to register to vote. We're going to have some links that we'll post up in the comments for people living in Connecticut, how you can register to vote. There are still ways to do that if you live in this state, so it is not too late to get out and get engaged. So first up, I want to introduce someone who is no stranger to most of us living here in the state of Connecticut. That is State Senator Doug McCrory. He represents Hartford, Bloomfield, and Windsor. Say hello, Senator. I think you're on mute, but when we come back to you, you won't be.
I'm back.
He's back. All right. So hello, Senator. Up next, we have Maxine Robinson Lewin, who is the president of the Greater Hartford chapter of the NAACP. Hey, Maxine.
Hey, how are you?
I am great and so excited to have you with us. Next, we have Chanel Francis, Civic Engagement Chair at UConn for the NAACP, representing for the young folks. Say hey.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Great to have you. We also have Mike Bland, who is the National Director of Leaders of Color, part of Education Reform Now. Hey, Mike.
Hey, good evening. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you as well. We are also joined by Adam Cloud, who is the Hartford City Treasurer.
Hey, everybody.
Hey there, great to have you with us. And we also have joining us Veronica Airy Wilson, who's a former deputy mayor of Hartford. And I think there were some technical challenges, so we're going to try to get those sorted out. But we just want to get right into what we are talking about today, and that is voting. I figured I would start with a little story time. As a journalist, it's not often I get to talk about myself, but I will share this. So I turned 18 the day after I graduated from high school. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and one of the things that I will always remember about what's a fairly big birthday that came at a big time in my life is that on my 18th birthday, when my whole family came to celebrate and everybody wanted to be together, my dad did not get me a birthday card. My dad instead chose to give me a voter registration card. And it is something that I have always remembered, that on my 18th birthday, I just graduated. He said, this is what you need to have. And I grew up in DC and knew that voting was important. Never thought that I wouldn't vote. But he made it clear in that moment that the gift that I can give you is this power to exercise your voice. But when we look at voting in the United States, you see that not everybody feels that way. Even at the highest of highs, voter turnout generally is only around 60% in this country. So there's still a lot of people who are not using their voice. I looked up numbers today. In 2016, according to the Census Bureau, 59.6% of eligible Black voters reported that they had cast a ballot. What do you say to folks who believe that they just don't have a reason to vote? What do you think is the reason that people need to participate now and in every election, not just the presidential? Senator McCrory, we will start with you.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank the brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi for putting this forum on. Always socially involved and engaged you brothers are. So let me just get right to it. Why do Black people feel as though why they shouldn't vote? Well, for one thing, many people feel as though they don't see the value in voting because they don't see the immediate turnaround. But I try to tell people voting is like an investment. You have to be in the game in order to get a payoff. So I go to people as young as 18 years old and encourage them to get out to vote, because when they don't vote, when you don't exercise your vote, you actually are voting because you're allowing the other person to make a decision for you, and that's not something we can have in our community. And I think one more thing that's very important that will encourage more people to go out and vote.
It looks like the senator has frozen. So, Maxine, I'll kick it over to you. What do you think when you hear people say that they don't think it's important to vote? You think about what the work is that the NAACP has done now for decades to ensure that our people have the right to vote. What do you make of that? You're on mute.
Always do that. So as the NAACP, we have engaged in several voter registration drives throughout the last several months, and we have encountered people who just simply aren't interested in registering to vote. And a lot of times we try to, tell them the importance of voting. And to kind of echo the sentiments of Senator McCrory, a lot of people just don't think that it's important to vote because they don't see the immediate effect to their lives. And so as we're out in the community, we try to educate individuals, that is important to vote in all elections, especially your local election, because those are the elections that impact your family directly, whether it be your educational system, the police force. So we try to, educate people on why they should vote in these upcoming elections.
I want to talk something about the idea of young people and engagement. Oftentimes, the most reliable voting bloc we know for sure in the United States of America is people who are over the age of 65. They're the most likely to vote often in every election and also to vote down the ballot. But young people, a lot of times you don't necessarily hear them with those same feelings. We ran a story today where a young man who was included said that, he didn't like either candidate, so he just didn't think he wanted to vote. Chanel, what do you think about voting as a young person? I would imagine this is going to be your first presidential election voting. What are you hearing from your peers about voting? What have you told them about the importance of casting a ballot?
Well, I try to encourage all of my friends to vote, especially the ones that, don't have the same opportunities to be in a collegiate environment and surrounded by people who actually who know the effects of voting and how it can affect, us in our country. So with that being said, I more so try to tell them, you have a bigger voice than what you think you have. Of course, there are many people who say, well, that's not true. The president doesn't do anything for me. Our own state officials don't do anything for me. And I just feel like, what? And I just feel like they should try to understand more that, things don't happen overnight. But just by them participating in elections and getting in the candidates that we view as people that are willing to help our, not even just our local community, but communities across the board. I feel like that's just a big step, like one of the steps that we need in order to start to create that change.
When you think about your friends on campus, how many folks are you seeing who are saying, I will vote, or I plan to vote, or how often are you having to kind of encourage people that this is something that they should do?
Oh, all of my friends on campus are voting. Every single one. I have not met not one of my friends who are on campus or pursuing a collegiate degree or certificate that has said I'm not voting. Like, everyone is voting. All of my friends are making sure, and it's the same thing for my friends who are here. All of my friends who are here are encouraging their friends back home. Because I'm originally from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Some of you might be familiar with Bridgeport. So I'm definitely, still trying to encourage a lot of my inner city friends to, make sure you go out and you fill the polls. Bring all of your family members. Make sure you let them know, like, this is important. I understand that you might feel like it isn't, but it's so much deeper than how you might be viewing it. But yeah, as far as my friends on campus, everyone's going to go vote. Everyone's already registered. A lot of them have already sent in their absentee ballots, so we are on it.
Well, that makes me happy, and I'm sure it makes everybody who's here happy. Senator McCoy, I see we got you back. You were trying to make a second point when we lost you, so I just wanted to give you the chance to do that now.
No, so I wanted to go back as an educator. I always explain to people, especially kids at a young level, how it's important to vote. So I give you a quick 30-second example. We have I put 10 kids on one side room, 10 kids on the other side room. 10 kids on one side, they want pizza for lunch. The other 10 want wings. Everyone gets to vote, right? If we go vote, it's going to be even. Then I have to make a decision. But what happens when one of those kids, let's say the kid who wanted pizza, say, you know what? I don't feel like getting up this morning to go vote. I'm not going to do it. Guess what? The ones that want wings win. So by you not voting, you actually did vote. You allow the other people to win. And that's why it's so important to vote, because your voice counts is very important. And again, all politics is local. So we should be voting on every level, every single time there is something out there. So I encourage young people to go out to vote, and older people who have not voted. There's people who didn't vote until Obama was ran for office. And lastly, people who are running for office, you have to give the people a reason why they should come out to the vote. So your message is very important. So messaging will also encourage people to get out and vote.
I agree. Not voting is also a vote. I wanted to turn to Mike and to Adam to talk some about the idea of policy and how you're voting on issues, not often just the president or, your senators, your mayors, that kind of thing. A lot of people, I think, don't make the connection between the people they see on the news who are elected officials and what that means for their everyday life. But can you talk some about how voting can affect policy and ultimately affect the taxes we pay, the schools that our children attend, the roads that we all drive on, and that sort of thing? Mike, you can go first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you again. And thank you to the brothers at Kappa Alpha Psi for holding this one. Look, I think, point blank, when you think about policy, particularly, I always say, look at your school board members now and see who spoke up and who spoke out. We're dealing with the biggest pandemic we've seen in over 100 years. And people are wondering, why haven't they gotten messaging on what's going on in their schools, what kind of technology their students are going to get, how the dollars are going to be spent, how are we going to pay for this, how are we going to pay for that? That is your local school board. That's not your city councilman. That's not Senator Doug McCoy. That's not Mayor Luke Bronin. Those are your members that sit on the local school board. And so I think even now, it's incumbent upon us, particularly about young, and you made a good point about young people. I think the problem now is that we have politicians or people who are running for office that don't speak to young people. Because a lot of times we say, hey, here goes your win number, here are your traditional voters, go after these folks. But I think as we look at this pendulum shift that we're seeing through our country, younger voters are becoming more progressive. They're observing more progressive values. They're observing what is going to make sense to them in their 21st century, country, in their 21st century Hartford. And that's that whether that's school policy, environmental policy, criminal justice, they're speaking up probably louder or just as loud as folks spoke up during the civil rights movement. So policy plays a big point, but we have to break that policy down to, as I like to say, a third grade reading level. Because a lot of the policy is not that convoluted. It's just a lot of words that are in there that make the policy hard. And so I'm so excited for this generation because not only are they paying attention, but they're speaking up and they're stepping out. And so, I think particularly when you look at the two sides, it's who's speaking to your values. And granted, your candidate may not have won, but what either side of the aisle that you're on, you have to understand that, they're like Senator Doug McCoy said, there is a choice. Sitting at home is not a choice. And so you're giving, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, you're giving them the advantage by sitting home and not casting your ballot.
Mr. Cloud, you are the treasurer, so you know that politics, it often comes down to money, dollars and cents. What do you think about folks who think they don't need to vote and don't necessarily think that a difference will be made by their ballot?
Well, certainly, and Leslie, first let me say thank you so much for hosting this evening, and hello to my fellow panelists and to my brothers of Hartford Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. I appreciate you guys doing this and allowing me to participate. I want to pick off where Mike left off. And Mike, good to see you, brother. Politicians don't always get it right. We're not perfect, but unless you are engaged in the process of voting, you're not in the game. And one of the things that I think young people have an opportunity to do early is to begin to get into the process of building the habit of voting, because changing policy doesn't happen overnight, but it can be impactful. And the more routine it becomes where you continue to vote year after year, you're going to increase the opportunity for having those individuals that actually speak to your needs, hear your voice, that are in the halls of power. Because every General Assembly across the United States, the state houses, where Doug is, that's where the laws get made. Where if you like the car that you drive, but you don't like the taxes that you pay, that's an impact that's made at a policy level. The amount of taxes you pay to the state of Connecticut in your paycheck is decided by those that are sitting in the halls of power. And when there's an imbalance, for instance, if one party controls more of that House and Assembly than the other, they're going to dictate the will of what they want. So it's critically important that we as people of color in particular, and then young people, begin to take ownership of that purchase that we have. Let's not forget, yes, the civil rights, but when people say that nothing has changed, I think about, try and say that to somebody who was living in 1940 or 1950. This country certainly has changed for the better because of the vote, because of the sacrifice that Representative John Lewis made. And we have to stand up and respect that sacrifice and continue down that path to ensure that we're taking a conscious effort to own our purchase, our opportunity to vote, to be able to then put the people in office that can assist us better than those that don't even listen to us.
I think you made excellent points, and you kind of helped me segue into my next question. Over the summer, we watched as a nation protests from coast to coast that followed the unfortunate death of George Floyd, but we're kind of a more of a platform for this notion, the movement of Black Lives Matter. We've heard so many people talking about the fact that they don't feel safe in America's streets, that they don't feel like law enforcement or lawmakers serve them. But oftentimes you hear a lot of those folks say that they don't want to engage in the political process. This is open to anyone who wants to respond, but how do you think that getting engaged in that political process can make a difference in some of the issues that we saw amplified through this summer of unrest?
I'd like to tackle that initially. I'll say this, and you are dead on, Leslie. This summer, I'll totally honest, if it wasn't for the protests and the outrage by especially young people from all walks of life, rich, poor, black, white, yellow, brown, if it wasn't for those young people out there demanding, not asking, but demanding change and accountability by us as elected officials, by law enforcement, I'm gonna tell you, in Connecticut, what we did, the bill that we passed this summer, would never have gotten done if it wasn't for the voices in and we went ahead and we made historic change in the state of Connecticut. It wasn't popular. Many people didn't like it, but because of their voices, when we went in those back rooms and we had our heated discussions, I made it clear that this isn't about you all. This is about those people who are in those streets, who are coming up to the state capitol, demanding we make change, and I have to answer to them. And it made that bill pass, and it made law. So because of you young people, you are the ones that affected change, and you are the ones that's gonna hold us as elected officials accountable from this point on. I think politics in this country is going to be something new, as it's going to be a new normal as we move forward. And I think people are going to be much more engaged from this point on as we move forward as a country. And lastly, I didn't get a chance to say this, I want to thank the brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi for putting this together. It also demonstrated this summer that how we as a Divine Nine can come together unified to make change in our communities.
Hey, Leslie, may I just pick up where Doug left off, because he's so right about what happened at the General Assembly with the police accountability bill. But let me take it down to another level. Number one, if Doug hadn't been in the room, who himself as a man of color understood what was happening in the streets, I mean, he would be vigilant about it, whether or not it was George Floyd. But because it was our young people out there fighting, it encouraged him even more, I'm sure, to stand strong up against the resistance that he was feeling in those back rooms. And then I take it to the next level. As the treasurer who pays the pension, the retirements for all these cops, I'm gonna tell you right now, cops in Hartford, the ones that didn't like that accountability board, were in my office filing their retirement papers. So that's a direct impact of what the power of us as a voice can do. Those bad apples that everybody talks about, oh, there's only a few bad apples. Guess what? Most of them retired because they didn't want to be held accountable. And now they're out of the system. So that is an absolute positive result of that activity. And I would add that it can't be just about the moment. It has to be about the movement, right? A moment happens and it ends. I think the George Floyd piece, the Breonna Taylor piece, is a movement. And to that point, going back to my comment about how we have to continue moving on, President Obama was on TV tonight talking about this, and he shared this example. He said, you know, he's got a friend who's a bodybuilder and trainer, and people always, you know, month in, they start working out and they say, oh, you know what? I'm good. I don't feel like working out anymore. And he said, well, you know, when they started out, they said, man, you got to make me look like The Rock. And the trainer says to him, let me tell you something, my friend, you're never going to look like The Rock. But what you can do is you can keep working out so you can extend your life. You can live healthier to benefit your children and yourself. And that's what voting is like too. We can't just say, I'm not going to be engaged. We have to commit to being engaged in a process that over time and commitment will make a gradual change. And that gradual change could be, as we look at things like, what really disturbs me talking about Black Lives Matter, because of Donald Trump, we have Attorney General William Barr. William Barr, under the radar, is changing sentencing laws that affect us mostly. But when we voted in Barack Obama, he had the opportunity to put AG Eric Holder. And yes, we didn't stop police brutality. And yes, we didn't stop people going to jail. But when those sentencing guidelines were under review by AG Holder, they were changed and much more reflective of the reality that so many of us people of color experience, that have been now turned over on their side by AG Barr. So again, voting matters.
When you think about the presidential election. It's now less than 2 weeks away, in addition to all the other things that people will be voting for on November 3rd. But when you think about this election season, it has been incredibly tense, incredibly divisive. And some people have seen it and said, you know what, I opt out for that reason. I don't want to be bothered with either of these candidates or anyone else whose name may appear on the ballot in my state. Without endorsing anyone, because we're just here to encourage people to vote, what do you say to folks who say, I don't want to vote because I don't like either of the candidates, or I don't like anyone who's there, and they just decide that they won't participate?
Okay, I'll jump in on that one. I like to say politics is a contact sport. It is not a spectator sport. And so when I say contact, I'm not using the metaphor as in football. It's contact because I need to make sure I contact everybody I know that supports not only my agenda, but my agenda for my children, my nieces and nephews, for my grandmother, right? This is bigger. You know, we think that, you know, voting for the president or voting for our governor is somebody we're going to have over for dinner. We're not. We're voting for somebody who has our best interests at hand. And maybe not all of our interests are always, you know, are always on display. But I tell you, there's a clear, distinct difference between now from one party to another. And there's one party that will stand for racism. There's one party that will no longer stand for racism. There's one party that will denounce what's going on in our country in the medical pandemic and the racial pandemic. And there's another party that tells you, I'm not going to wear masks. I tell people, stop with the apathy, right? Everybody's, you know, I'm just, for me, I'm tired of, oh, well, they don't hear my voice. Have you made your voice heard? I tell people, before you bark at Donald Trump or Joe Biden, just name me the members on your local school board. Name me 4 members on your city council, because you're ready to yell at the person who controls the White House, but you don't know who's controlling outside your house. And so we really need to understand that when we really want to affect change, it happens on a local level. We need to be hell-bent and excited that we get to vote for, one, not only people that look like us, but people who have the same interests of us. And so I always say, even now more than ever, this is why we need more people of color, more leaders of color to step up and step out. Because if you have a problem, you're going to sit on the side. You got 1 or 2 options at our inflection point in this country. You're either going to run for office or you're going to get up and do something about it. Not saying anything. We no longer stand by. You know, even stop inviting them to the barbecue, because their points are no longer valid. They are sitting by and waiting idle, and they're waiting on they when they is us. And so I think for us, we now have an opportunity to encourage more than we've ever seen each other to be involved in the process, really express our ideas. We now have a seat at the table. Right? But are we now going to back down now that we have a seat at the table? Or now are we going to say, you know what, here are the issues that are really bothering or really hindering our community. Here's what education inequity looks like. Here's what housing inequity looks like. Here's what food deserts look like in our community. Or we're just going to say, nah, they don't never support any of my interests. Well, have you made your interests heard? So I think for us, it gives us an opportunity to have a platform more broader than we've ever thought we could have.
I knew I would make that mistake at some point. Maxine, what do you think? Do you think that not voting because, you know, perhaps the presidential candidates or whoever's running in whatever election doesn't necessarily check all of someone's boxes is an option? Or do you think that folks should still get out there and choose a name? You're muted.
Yeah. I think people should still get out there and choose a name, because again, not voting is voting. We see a lot of times in our local elections that people are elected into positions because just a small few have voted. So I think people should go out and choose someone who somewhat aligns with their views and opinions.
And just out of curiosity, I know that you guys have voter registration drives and that sort of thing. Have you heard that from folks, that they feel that they just don't need to engage because they're not thrilled with who's on the ballot? Or do you feel like there's a changing trend and that people feel like, particularly for this election, they need to get involved?
Some people have stated that they are not thrilled with who's on the ballot. We've gotten a lot of questions of they don't know who to vote for. As everyone knows, the NAACP is nonpartisan, so we really can't tell them who to vote for, but we can kind of tell them things that they need to look for to educate themselves on their decision that they make with who they choose to vote for on election day.
Thank you. Just as a reminder for everyone who's watching, anybody who may have just joined in, we are talking about voting here in the state of Connecticut and across the country with the election now less than 2 weeks away. If you're watching on Facebook, right under the link for this, there's information that says get information about voting, and it will literally take you directly to the Connecticut Secretary of the state's website, where you can still register to vote here in Connecticut. You have about a week left to register in advance, and then after that, there's same day election registration information. You can register same day on election day in Connecticut, but there's some specific information you need to know about doing that because it's a little different than just showing up at your neighborhood polling place. But please, we encourage everyone to take the time to register to vote and participate in this election. Time is running out, but your voice can still be heard. So I want to now move to one of our younger people who is joining us to talk about voting, and that is a member of the Boys and Girls Club. Jada Copeland is a part of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Hartford. She's 17 years old. She's been a part of the club for the last 9 years. She is a senior at Bulkley High School, is also the former Smart Girl of the Year for the Asylum Hill Boys and Girls Club. She's now Keystone president and one of the greatest teens, I'm told, who is a part of the club right now. Look at her smile. She's like, yep, that's me. Jada, I know you have a question for the panelists. Let's hear it.
Okay. Hi, good evening. So my question is, as a first-time voter, we've all heard that our vote matters. So, however, the Electoral College makes a lot of voters question whether our vote really does matter. And at least twice in recent history, we have had presidential candidates win the popular vote, but lose the election because of the Electoral College. So could the panelists talk about what this could mean for 2020 and if it could happen again?
Sure. Mike, you want to go? I'm happy to jump in there too. So great question, coupled with a great smile. Congratulations. Let me first say this. You're right. And let's just talk about Hillary Clinton in 2016. It was really 3 states that caused Hillary to lose the election in the Electoral College, right? Because although she won by 3,000 votes, what happened was the states and their legislature decided which way to cast those votes. And they were able to cast those votes such that Trump got to 270, which is the number. What I expect this year is that not to happen for 2 reasons. One, if the popular vote is so significant, and meaning that let's call instead of 3,000, it's 3 million, it's 7 million, or it's 10 million that Biden wins by, I think, one, it's going to be hard for the other person to contest the results of the election, which is what you're hearing now about him going to court, possibly to argue. But the other piece is, and it's why these 3 states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan become so important, because if Biden can pull that off and win those 3, the pathway to 270 for Trump becomes impossible. It's just a math question where he may not have enough of the states to calculate up to the 270 votes that he needs. But, and I would say this again, it also gets down to the vote, because the more people that go out and vote in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Wisconsin, it is likely that because the legislature and the person that votes has to take the will of the people when they go to the Electoral College process. And so if the majority of Michigan, Pennsylvania voters are saying they want candidate Biden, then that's the way they should be voting. And if they vote that way from the Electoral College perspective, then that Electoral College number of votes will go to Biden.
Just to jump in, I think you hear folks say that they are bothered by the Electoral College, and this is not just Republicans or Democrats. I've heard this all over the world. A lot of people who don't understand America's system, that there's not necessarily one man, one vote. Mike, I know you have background working campaigns and stuff. What do you say to folks who use the Electoral College as part of the reason to disenfranchise themselves because they don't believe that their vote matters?
Yeah, I would just say it's misinformation, and I would say the Electoral College is just one barometer on the national level. But beyond Electoral College, we get an opportunity to flip the Senate, United States Congress, which really sets our agenda. And there's no Electoral College involved in the United States Senate, United States Congress. In regards to the Electoral College, I will say this, and I know we're supposed to remain nonpartisan, but I've had opportunity to read a lot of Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris's plan, and one of the things that they've talked about was getting rid of the Electoral College. So therefore, we still do stand as a true democracy. But the Electoral College, we got to know the history. I mean, Electoral College stood for two things. One, to kind of balance the equal rights and kind of balance the both coastlines and give the middle part of America equal play in our electoral system. But it also, in our dark past, which we're dealing with finally in America, it also has to deal with the 3/5 clauses as Americans. So I say, to me, that is only, to me, it's and you know, I'll be facetious, or look, folks will call me what they want, but it's only an excuse. And I say it's only an excuse because even if you're paying attention to Electoral College, we also learned that the Supreme Court passed legislation, or they passed a law, or they agree with the law that electors for the Electoral College can now switch their vote on Electoral College as well, right? So, but it has to go with the person who wins the popular vote, right? So I say all that to say is there are imbalances and checks and balances in our democracy, but again, it all goes about, you know, educating yourself around the folks who you want to support. Again, Joe Biden said, I want to get rid of I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these three things. I'm going to get rid of the filibuster. I'm going to get rid of Electoral College. There was one more, I drew a blank. But that's one of the things, because he wants to make this an equal democracy. You know, everybody's vote, quote unquote, counts. But you know, again, the Electoral College historically was supposed to be a checks and balance system to have an equal say and equal rights, because we had such an imbalance of more people being on one side of the coast or both sides of the coast, and not a lot of people being in the middle of our country. I
just want to piggyback off Mike for 30 seconds. And Mike is being nice about it. Is really rooted in slavery, and where that 3/5 this Electoral College came from, and it's just a holdover from a system where we did not have a voice, where only wealthy white men could participate. And that was a compromise. And basically, it was a compromise that compromised us. It compromised Reconstruction. So that's the history of Electoral College. However, throughout, a number of states are passing what we call national popular vote laws. And I lost you guys a minute because I had to go do something else. But I hope if anyone discussed this already, I apologize. But Connecticut has passed the national popular vote law, and about 20 states have passed that also. And once we get to 50 states, then we can have an open one man, one vote concept. So I don't want people to utilize the excuse that, oh, I don't understand the Electoral College, that's why I'm not going out to vote. I think Mike hit it on the head. There are so many other levels to government, and more importantly, what affects you individually is your local government. So that's why it's very important to go out to vote on the local level, and even on the state level, and our federal officers. We have people up for election then. That's why it's so important to vote. Again, I hate the idea of Electoral College, and it's very difficult to explain to a lay person. But the reality is, unfortunately, we will not get a visit from Biden and Harris, because our state is not in play. Our state is considered a blue state, and it's going to be blue. So a lot of we won't see a lot of resources like we did when President Obama ran. And that's the sad part about it. But it's very important that we still get out the vote.
And I think that's the bottom line indeed, to get out and vote. Not understanding the Electoral College. World famous basketball player Shaquille O'Neal said that he never voted until this year. I believe he's 48 years old, because he didn't understand the Electoral College, but he did decide that he would cast a ballot this year. So again, encourage everybody to vote. Also encourage everybody, if you're watching us online, to submit your questions. We're going to get some viewer questions that we're going to answer for the last section of this panel. And I'm going to turn that over, I believe, to Mr. Stephen Wilson to get us some of the questions that we're hearing from people watching this panel. Or if we, oh, I think we have him. Or TJ.
I think you're on mute, Brother Clark.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. One of the viewer questions is, when is the deadline for voter registration in Connecticut?
I think, well, you can register up until the day you go into the ballot box. So, but are you asking about absentee ballots or the ability to go? Because you can go walk into the into your polling place and vote the day of, provided you provide. I think they want 2 forms of identification.
And does Connecticut does allow same-day voter registration for elections?
Yeah, but the bigger question is whether or not you've gotten your absentee ballot, and have you requested that absentee ballot. And I would, if you're in Hartford, I would simply reach out to the Register of Voters office in Hartford, and they can walk you through the process to receive your absentee ballot.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator. TJ, I didn't hear the question, but it sounded like, what was the question again? I think I wanted to add something to it. What was the question?
When is the deadline to register for to vote in the state, and also two, regarding same-day voter registration, does Connecticut allow that?
Oh, okay. No, so I just want to add, although Connecticut is very progressive when it comes to voting, and again, you can vote on election day if you have the form of ID. One of the things that I'm going to be pushing next legislative session is the ability to Connecticut have early voting. I spoke to my friends down in North Carolina. They started voting last week. They have voting hours, or even on Saturdays and Sundays. They're making it very easy for people to vote. In Connecticut, we don't have early voting, unfortunately, for whatever reason. And that's something I'm going to push next year, because I think if we have more days and give people more opportunities, more hours to vote, I think we'll see our numbers turn up. And also what I noticed in a lot of other states that Connecticut don't do, they considered a presidential election day a holiday. So you have, they make it so easy for you to grow. So no one goes to work, everyone goes to the poll. And that's some of the things that we should be looking at in Connecticut, allowing people to vote early, and also allowing them to vote on either on Saturdays and Sunday. I think that's very important to our democracy. Voting is the most important. If we live in a democracy, the most important aspect of the democracy is the ability to vote.
Thank you, Senator.
Hey, you know, in other jurisdictions, they were talking, in Texas in particular, they have drive-up voting.
Yes,
which might be something you want to think about too.
They also have in North Carolina, they have curbside voting. So if you're handicapped, all you gotta do is pull up. They'll come out to your car and get your vote for you. You would think that places like Connecticut, that quote unquote more progressive, we're not as progressive as we think. If states like North Carolina and Texas are allowing people to vote multiple days and provide opportunities for them, that means something.
Now, Senator, for the viewing audience that may not be so abreast as to these type of policies, proposed policies regarding curbside voting, and also to making sure that election day is a holiday, recognized holiday, is that something that you and your colleagues discussed and passed at your level at the state capitol?
Absolutely, it's been discussed before, and I think considering what's going on in our country and how polarizing voting has been, I think in Connecticut, that's something, a policy that we have to pass this legislative session. We did something this year in the special session to allow for everyone to have absentee ballots. Is allowed now in the state of Connecticut. It wasn't allowed years before, but because of the pandemic, we changed the laws to allow the people to have no excuse absentee ballots in the primary and also for general elections. So we understand there's a need to do it. And once we see those numbers go up, we need to take it to another step to provide early voting processes for everyone else.
Thank you. There's another question from our viewing audience. Looks like it's from YouTube. The question is, there is a huge amount of conflicting data in theory in nearly every year of the policy, in every area of policy. What instruction would you give voters to help sort the truth from the information they can access through media? It's open to anybody.
Oh, let me just first start by saying I have a hard time with the notion of fake media, because facts are facts. And so I think what distracts us too often is that we're getting our source of information from, platforms that are social networking as opposed to actual facts. So, if you want to make the clearest determination of what a policy is, it's a law that got passed in a general assembly or by the city council in the form of an ordinance, and in the state a law. That law is a public record. You can read it. If you have questions about a policy, there's always a law that created that policy, and the facts are right there in black and white.
Thank you. Mike, in your experience, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Treasure Cloud that, there's two things you can do. There's an Oprah request, which is where you could, or there's a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, where you can kind of find out anything you want to find. You go to the state legislature, you can go to the town clerk's office, you can go to other places around New Jersey, the other places I heard Senator McCoy talk about North Carolina. You can go to the county clerk's office, and you can ask: Is there a bill? Is there a bill that says I can't park 20 feet away from my driveway? Anything. Is there a bill that protects me, or that says that I don't have to bring a license when I go vote? These are things you could ask your city council. Your town council, town clerk, or you can ask your county town clerk. But I would tell folks, seriously, I think there's this great tool they made about 15 years to everybody called Google. And believe it or not, some of the best searches will come up at the top. The more you keep going down, or the less reliable searches. And I don't think we use our tools enough. And I would tell you, everything that's on Twitter is not true. Everything that's on Facebook is not true. And I think they're finally doing a good job of inoculating the truth versus the lies. And so, for me, it's like it's about time for us to do our research and not just be so quick to retweet everything. I saw somebody said, did you see Hunter Biden sent text to his dad or his laptop? I'm like, what are we talking about? Right? But what does that have to do with Donald Trump? What does that have to do with Joe Biden? And things can be photoshopped, right? So I say all that to say it's like, use your local resources. And I would tell you, in Connecticut, I would say the state legislators and the city council folks are some of the most accessible people I've ever met in my life. And so if folks say, oh, I can't get access to my city councilman or my city treasurer or my state legislator, my state senator, or even my representative in Congress, I would tell them you're a bold-faced liar, because in Connecticut, you all are pretty accessible to get a hold of.
I appreciate that, Michael. But I was going to add, I'm glad you raised that, because in answering that question a little further, TJ, elected officials serve your interest. We are there to assist you. And so whether that's reaching out to your mayor's office, calling your state rep's office, they all got telephones. If you're living in Hartford, you can go to hartford.gov. There is a website that has the ability to search information, get contact names. My office is connected there. If you've got a question, or if you just want to talk about an issue that you may not have clarity on, we have a pretty open door policy. Happy to take that question, happy to be responsive, because we work for you.
Thank you for that, Mike and Treasurer Cloud. Next question we have is, what policies are in place to ensure older voters can feel safe going to vote?
I consider to talk about this one. As for policies, I'm not sure exactly what policies are being set in place, but I do know that from calling my local town clerk's office that they are trying to do everything to make sure that not only just older voters are safe, but the general population overall. So I know that my local jurisdiction, they are going to be passing out they're going to be having PPT kits, in case anyone wants one. And they're also going to be, heavily like enforcing social distance. And I believe that there will be a specific section within the polls, like, for maybe people who don't want to necessarily go all the way inside the building with other people. There will be another area where they can, go to. But that's just some of the things that Bridgeport will be doing.
Thank you for the information. And I see our moderator just came back on, and we can turn it over to Ms. Leslie Mays.
Hey there, one more thing I would want to include just about the polling places. Obviously, again, we want to reiterate that here in Connecticut, if you were previously a registered voter, regardless, everyone in Connecticut who is a registered voter has the option to vote absentee in this election, with the reasoning being COVID-19 and the ongoing pandemic. So you are not required to go into the polling place so long as you return your ballot and have a postmark by election day. That's one thing everyone should know. Also, you can, in addition to sending your ballot through the mail, most towns all have a drop box or several designated drop boxes that are usually near your town clerk or town hall. You have to look up in the town that you live in where you can drop your ballot off in a secure ballot box. So that's also an option. And I just know as a journalist, I've gone into a polling place during the primaries to see how they would be set up because of how the pandemic is affecting everything and how we congregate together. And at least in the polling place that I was able to see in downtown Hartford, I know that they are going to be distanced. They're erecting barriers and plexiglass and some of the stuff that we've seen in our workplaces and stores and restaurants and things that we go into. All of those things are also going to be in place in polling places across Connecticut. So a number of options to try to make you feel safe as you go out to vote or go to the mailbox to vote or go to a drop box to vote, but just make sure that you vote. We want to go now to our panelists just for final closing remarks. Everyone knows what my final thoughts are. Just please vote no matter who you vote for. Use your voice. Cast a ballot on November 3rd and in every election. We will start with Maxine.
Just want everyone to please go out and vote because our lives do depend on it.
Mike Bland.
Yeah, I think, this election we've arrived at yet another inflection point in our American history where we have to make a hard decision as Americans. And whether you're in Connecticut, whether you're in New Jersey, North Carolina, California, Texas, it's more than just encouraging folks to vote. It's about educating folks how to vote. Somebody said to me, my grandmother said to me, not somebody, my grandmother said to me the other day, I've never seen everybody telling everybody to go vote. That's a clear sign, right? You go to Target, on the back of the receipt, they're telling you to go vote. You go to the gas station, you go pump your gas, you hear something that's telling you to go vote. You go to the bank, you see signs that say, you see Q cards or QR codes that tell you, have you registered to vote? That's a clear sign that this election is the most important election of our lifetime. I said to my father-in-law today, I said, I've known I've been black for a long time, but I never knew how racist this country was. Until every day you got to walk outside and you just feel that pulse and you just feel that heat from others around you. And you say to yourself, this election means more than just Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I said this even before Joe Biden announces this election was for the soul of our nation, because there's so much hatred, there's so much anger, but at the other side of darkness, we learn that there's also a great light. And so I believe that we will come out on the better side of this. I believe that if we do what we need to do, and we're seeing unprecedented numbers, people standing in lines for hours that are voting and expressing their right to vote, that they're stepping up and stepping out because they know what's at stake. And it's not just, everybody's going to tell you that You know, your ancestors died for this. They did more than die for this. They marched for this. They bled for this. They cried for this. They prayed for this. And so I think it's a failure upon us if we don't step up and step out and don't take everybody in our house and take 6 more people to go vote. And just don't think that Connecticut's blue. Just don't think that New Jersey's blue. Don't ever take this moment for granted, because we will be left behind if we don't do what we need to do. So encourage, reaching your phone. If you want to go out and party, you'll text everybody else. So I ask you to have that same party in your phone and tell everybody else to go to.
I'll just say, Mike, you nailed it, brother. I'll just add this to it. Just think about how if you were Jewish and this was right before World War II, or if you was a black person after Reconstruction all the way up to 1965. Think about how those people felt, and this is what's going on with us today. If you ever thought how they felt, this is how we feel now. And like Mike said, our people didn't just die to vote, they marched it. This is our generation's cross to bear, and we have to bear that cross. And one of the things we can do, and just like our ancestors did, is go out there and participate in this democracy, and go out there and have your voices heard by exercising your constitutional right to vote. This is our time. This is our movement, and we have to execute and take advantage of it right now. We have to strike when the iron's hot, and we have to prove to this country that everyone is a part of building this democracy, and the world is watching. So it is incumbent upon us to bring your family, your friends, your cousins, your co-workers, encourage them to go out to vote, encourage it like your life depends upon it. And in reality, your life really might. If you're comfortable with the way we are right now, if you're comfortable with the conditions of the climate in this country and what is going on, then you might not vote. But if you want to see change, if you think this country can live up to its words, then you go out there and show them by voting.
Make sure you vote, everybody. Thank you, Senator. I want to bring in really quickly, before we continue on with our final thought, one of the newest members of the Hartford Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, smiling, Steve Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to read what Veronica Erie Wilson, former deputy mayor of Hartford, has left with us, her final thoughts. She says, I would like to remind folks that their votes do matter. In many local elections, candidates win by 1 vote all the time. In addition, if we look back at the last major election 4 years ago, the large number of Black folks who did not vote could have changed the results for many states. Don't ever think that your vote doesn't count. Too many of our forefathers and mothers lost their lives trying to gain the right to vote. Veronica Erie Wilson.
Thank you, Steve. Next, I think we'll go to Mr. Adam Clapp.
Thank you. In 1619, enslaved Africans were brought to Port Comfort, Virginia. And since our arrival here, we have been beaten. We have been hung. Our women have been raped. We were oppressed by overseers and then police and KKK. And all that time, we survived. We went through the gauntlet and came through it. Sometimes stronger, but never weaker because of who we are as a community and as people. And now we face a different kind of threat, a threat related to something called Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, who threaten our right, our constitutional given right. And quite frankly, so many of us of color were here before they were even here. And to suggest that our right will be suppressed so that their view, which is to have them remain a majority when the numbers don't speak to that, or to disenfranchise us of our rights after being oppressed from 1619 to 1965? I don't think so. More importantly, it depends on what matters to you. Because if you have a pre-existing condition, you need to vote because you're going to lose health care. If you think that the laws that protect us and create an equal union in these United States are something that's important to you, you need to vote because the Supreme Court will change and shift, and it will be detrimental to our interests. And more importantly, we have a history of struggle. Why would we ever not, in this moment, pick up the torch, run with it, claim it, and take it over the victory? Because this is our moment. There has never been a moment in our lifetime, in this generation, where it mattered more for us to stand up, be engaged, embrace one another in this, which is our cause. Vote and make sure that you ask all those that you love to do the same.
Thank you. And I want to end with our closing remarks from the youngest on our panel, Chanel Francis.
Everyone, I just want to say that your voice, your vote, it matters way more than you think it does. I am highly encouraging you to bring all of your loved ones, bring all of your friends, talk to your neighbors. If you're at the grocery store, talk to the cashier, ask them like, hey, are you registered? Are you eligible? Go out and vote. Make sure they bring all their family members. Like, I'm always hearing my peers, especially my peers from back home in my inner city. I'm always hearing them say how, the system isn't meant for us. This system wasn't built for us. And that's true. It's 100% true. The system was not meant for us and it wasn't built for us. But you know what? If we go out and we rock the vote, if we go out and we storm those polling stations and we wear those polling stations out slowly but surely, one day we can change this system so that way it is meant for people that look like us. I have younger siblings, and I know my younger siblings look up to me as their big sister, and I know that they expect me to make sure that I vote so that way my vote can help to affect them in a positive way for when they're older. So I am encouraging every single one of you to get out to the polls if you are eligible. And if you aren't eligible, you know what? It's okay. Just make sure that you're keeping in high spirits the people that can vote. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this. We are all in it. So please go out, get out the vote, rock the vote, and storm the polls.
Everything you just said. Just all of that, more of that. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists. I want to send it back to the Hartford Alumni to wrap us up for the evening.
I guess I made the same mistake. Kerwin Lowe here, poll mark of the Hartford Alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. I just want to say, first of all, Leslie, thank you so much for moderating this session, and to all my panelists. Thank you for a very, very engaging discussion. I was sitting here listening, and it's just so inspiring to see a broad range of passion that spans across generations. There was a comment made that our elected officials make themselves available to us. So I think that rings true as we see the representation here tonight. So thank you all. And to the brothers who worked on this event and made it come together. I think this is so important. This discussion, getting out to vote. There's not much time left. We have less than 2 weeks, and it's just a discussion that we need to have. I'd like to give the opportunity for any of the other brothers on right now to give any final comments.
I want to say thank you, Brother Polmark, for leading the way and inspiring us to have this type of platform. And my words to everyone on the panel, thank you very much for agreeing to participate. You added a level of expertise that we have enjoyed to hear, and your fire, your passion, and your perspective roles really resonates within our hearts. And I hope that everyone who heard your words were encouraged, inspired, and most importantly, will now be activated to go out to vote. I just want everyone to keep in mind that voter registration deadline in the state of Connecticut is October 27th. However, the state of Connecticut does have same-day voter registration where you can go to your local town halls to register to vote and vote at in your town clerk's office. And please don't forget that November 3rd is a very pivotal moment in our lifetime, and that we must encourage everyone to go out and vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because we are definitely in perilous times. So we need everyone to activate their friends, their families, and their loved ones and encourage them to go vote.
I would quickly like to echo the sentiments of Brother Mike Bland. He said, if they don't vote, do not invite them to the barbecue. And also Chanel as well, wear the polling stations out. So get out and vote.
Okay. Brother Gray, any last comments?
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight and really sharing some great nuggets of wisdom. Your participation and involvement was very instrumental, and I think we touched a lot of people tonight by your words. And this will be able to be rebroadcast over and over up until the election. So thank you once again, Brother Polmark.
All right. And that will do it. I just want to thank everyone again for tuning in, and get out to vote. Thank you.
Thank you.